Hello, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with a list of books, or a pile of books, I guess. They're books that... Okay, so let me start over. Let me rewind. I was thinking about making a video about books that I've read that are out of my normal comfort zone of reading, but that I ended up really liking. And so I came up with a pile. I pulled some books off my shelf, but then I realized that like a lot of them are just like general fiction or contemporary books, because I mean really I like lots of genres except for, I don't know, and even looking at this I can't say except for contemporary or general fiction, because I like those books too. I just maybe don't read as many, so like I don't find as many that I like. Most of these are general fiction or contemporary. But I like them, even though that's not typically what I read. So the first one I'd like to talk to you about is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This was recently, maybe not so recent now, but this was made into a movie after it came out, after I read it. And it is way deserving of that. This is one of those books that once my daughter is a little bit older, this is definitely something I would like her to read. This is about a teenager, her name is Star, and she's in the car with one of her best friends. He's driving her home from a party. They get pulled over, he gets out, and he ends up getting shot and killed by a police officer for no reason. I mean, this is just an event that happens in our country way too often. It was a really difficult read because you've seen, at least me, and I know some other people have seen these awful videos or read these awful articles, or known people who have known people who, if we want to get down to it, they are black folks in America who have been killed by law enforcement officers for no fucking reason. That's what this book is about. Since it's told from the perspective of another teenager, it's probably a little bit easier to digest for someone who is a little bit younger than an adult. The main character is very, it's easy to get into her head, so it's easy to see her frame of mind, why she thinks what she thinks. It's easy to feel her emotions about this, and I mean, it's really an emotional topic, so if you're sympathetic to this kind of thing at all, I think it will be easy to really get into this book and what its message is, I guess. Filming this in May 2020, it's just crazy thinking about like when I read this. When did this book come out? 2016, I think? 2017. This came out in 2017, and almost literally nothing has changed since then. We're even dealing with now a man who was just shot in his neighborhood because he was black and he was jogging somewhere. So is there a more appropriate book for anybody to read? This was so well written. It was engaging. It made me cry, and it was a hard read, but it's an important read for adults and for teenagers, I think, both. Next on my list is Forbidden by Tabitha Suzuma, and this is like, I remember reading this and thinking, this is like if the Gallagher family in Shameless like had incestual relationships between the brother and the sister. That's this book. This is about a family where the siblings, the older siblings who are teenagers, are taking care of their younger siblings. Their mom is in the picture, but she very much like flits about. She doesn't necessarily care for them. She doesn't make sure that there's food in the fridge. She doesn't make sure that the bills are paid. So a lot of the times they have to fend for themselves, and like I said, the older siblings have to be parents to the younger siblings, and since they are taking on these weird parental roles that they shouldn't be, it's like there's the brother and the sister that are kind of like the mom and the dad, and I think this helps build this weird adult relationship that they shouldn't have with each other, which ends up definitely being a taboo relationship between a brother and a sister. It's a little bit long. I liked it even though it was a little bit long, but it is another one that's very sad. I think all these might be pretty sad to read, actually. Maybe that's why I like them. This is the only horror book I have in this pile. This is Hark, the Herald Angel Scream, edited by Christopher Golden. This is a book from the horror genre, which I love. But I guess the format of this book, it being an anthology, is kind of why it's included in this pile, because I typically do not like anthologies very much. I find that normally the first 3 or 4, maybe 5 stories are very good, and then the rest is just... And they trap me into thinking that it's gonna be a good anthology because like the first couple stories are very strong, and I'm like, this is good, I like this, and then the whole rest of it is poop. But this was a very strong anthology from start to finish. My favorite story in this is not the first or the second or the third. It is the 5th story, called Not Just for Christmas by Sarah Lotz. It has other really great well-known horror authors such as Sean McGuire, Josh Mallerman, Jeff Strand, Christopher Golden, who edited the anthology, Joe R. Lansdale, Tim Levin, Sarah Pimborough. She's a thriller writer typically, but it's just such a really great anthology, and one that I didn't think that I would like as much as I did, and I'm glad that I did, and that makes me try other anthologies. Usually I get burnt, but not burnt enough to never read anthologies again. So, excellent job, Christopher Golden. Great job editing that one. Next on my list is Bad Romance by Heather Demetrios. This is a contemporary young adult book. It's about a high school girl who gets involved with one of her classmates. He's a couple years older than her, but it ends up being a really abusive, emotionally and physically abusive relationship. She's in a household where there is some verbal abuse going on already. She is in a blended family. So, I mean, I had 2 blended families between my mom and my dad, and nothing super bad happened. And I'm not saying that all blended families are bad and that bad things happen, but it is statistically proven that children in blended families, children with step-parents, undergo abuse more often than families that are not blended. Is this just like the video where I talk too much? Yes. This is a great book though, especially if you like young adult contemporary novels, which like I typically don't, because I don't really like happy frou-frou pandas, like where you put like a Starbucks drink and you put a bunch of whipped cream on it and then you like top it with a tiny cute panda, and the panda happens to be wearing a sweatshirt, but it's like a crop top sweatshirt, and it's pink, and the panda is wearing like a hood, but the hood on the sweatshirt has like a horse mane, and it's Rainbow Dash from My Little Pony. Like, I'm just not into that kind of stuff. It's too happy for me. I'm not saying it's not okay for you to be happy. This book, it's a lot of sad relationship stuff, but it does have a slightly more happy ending. And man, this cover is so freaking beautiful. One of the best covers of any book I own. Next is Room by Emma Donoghue. I remember reading this. It was like when I had a lot of time to read a lot, and then I like didn't read a lot because I spent most of my time not doing that. And then I had a child, and so it was like this is when she like started napping on her own. So it was like I have 1 hour to read a day. I started reading. I didn't really know what kind of books to read, so it was just like reading through like anything that people recommended. This was one of those books. This is a great book. They made a movie of it a couple years ago, and movies, okay, but I don't think it captures the feeling quite like the book does. And I think this is a little unique because it deals with a woman who has been kidnapped and held in this special, kind of like a shed that this man has built. But they call it the room because it is just a room for them. She eventually has a son and she's trying to raise him in this room, and she's trying to do it in a way that doesn't distress him, but also teaches him that this isn't quite normal, but also like trying to nurture and teach him how to be a good normal human. So very complicated, and I think what makes this unique is that a lot of the book is that, but then like a lot of the book is after that, and them trying to assimilate to real, actual human life and like deal with this trauma and stuff like that. And it's really a great book. Like I said, I read this when I was starting to have more time to read after having a child, and I read this so quick. It's one of the, like, thinking back on how little time I actually had to focus on a book like this, I read it so quickly despite not having a lot of time to do that. So it's really a great book. Then I have a book that I've talked about a lot. It's called Tampa, and it's by Alissa, and she is so perfect and great. This is another general fiction book that deals with darker topics. This is about a teacher named Celeste, and she has set her life up so that she will be able to easily prey on teenage boys because that is who ultimately she is attracted to. And she's married to a police officer. She has very much what would look like from the outside like a perfect life. I mean, is there anything more fundamentally good than a teacher and a police officer being married? It's like the 1950s dream, right? Or maybe not, because she is a teacher. Maybe it's like the 1970s dream. But anyways, she is a teacher at like a middle school. She preys on children. It is rough, and she uses very explicit, like, not frou-frou language. I mean, she doesn't tiptoe around it. She tells you what is happening with this character. It says a lot about how as a society we treat women differently than men, even if they are predators and they are doing awful, horrible things. I mean, because this is something we've seen in our society. Teachers who molest their students. I mean, there's really just like a lighter tone when we talk about women having sex with their teenage students who are males. It really makes you think about the way you take in this information, because I have to say, like, even me reading this and like being disgusted by it, I know that if this had been a male teacher sleeping with a female student, it would have made me feel way grosser than it did. So, like, it gives you a lot to think about and a lot to digest, and it's a hard read, but it's a very well written read. I think Alissa writes really great characters. So this is another one that's like a really hard hitter, but I ended up really loving it. And lastly, another book I read last year. This is Swamplandia by Karen Russell. This is about a family who owns this kind of amusement park called Swamplandia, but the main attraction is their alligator wrestling. And tragedy has kind of hit this family. Their mother has died recently, and they're really trying to keep Swamplandia afloat. Their mother was ultimately like kind of the money generator, because people came to see her do these stunts, and rest of the gators and stuff like that. So this deals with a lot of like the aftermath with the park, and with her children dealing with her death and what this means. I think it has a lot of good history of Florida in it. It talks a lot about the swamps, how we tried to, how the United States tried to adapt to those in different ways, how we tried to take advantage of that by like you thinking about using hippopotamuses. There's also plants that we tried to plant in these areas to make it less swampy and more like an area where we could plant crops on and stuff like that. So it deals with that, which is very interesting. And it also deals with, I mean, like I said, this family who are very interesting and strange because they really haven't dealt with society in a normal way. Swamplandia is kind of on an island. It's somewhere where people would take a ferry out to see it and then leave the island back to the mainland. So there's not like other people living on this island except for this family. And really the only interactions these children have had is with their parents and with the man who mans the ferry and with tourists, with it, which is not normal. They haven't gone to normal school, so their world is like crumbling apart and they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And it's a really interesting story. I gave this 3 stars when I read it at first, but thinking back on it, it might be more like a 4-star book. Because, I mean, ratings are really subjective, and I think probably I should give myself some time before I give something a solid rating rather than like right after I read it. This does have some content warnings for child abuse, child sexual abuse. Yeah, it is another one that delves into like the darker areas of human nature, and also one of the sisters thinks she's marrying a ghost. I don't know. Like, what I've told you scratches the surface of this book. It's so wacky and interesting, and it's a really great book. Those are 7 books that I've read that are not in my typical genres that I read, but I've really enjoyed them a lot, and you might too if you thought the synopsises that I gave were interesting. Of course, look them up yourself because I don't know what you'll like, so just telling you what I thought about them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will be back soon, hopefully. Don't hold your breath. I mean, I will be back. I just don't know when it will be, so. But until then, I will see you guys later.